today comes from James 5:13 through 20. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. If any sick among you, let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of the faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have been committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elias was a man subject to like passion as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. And it rained not on the earth for the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sin of the error of his way shall save his soul from death, and shall hide all multitude of sins. May God bless the reading of this message.
Today's message I entitled, The Cause of Sin, or What Causes Sin? Well, it's actually a simple answer. We'll go ahead and get that out of the way. Being a human, we can't help it. Bless our hearts, we just can't help it. But we can do something about it. Now, I want to start off with something that we touched on at the end of last week. I kind of just looked at one part of it. There is more to it, and I want to kind of pick back up on that and then move ahead to a rather, you talk about, something you can't take literal in the Bible. This is one of the good examples of, don't take this, there's a message, it's not literal. And we're going to pick up with, it's in Mark 9, 38 through 50. Teacher, said John, we saw someone driving out demons in your name, and we told him to stop because he was not one of us. Do not stop him, Jesus said, for no one who does a miracle in my name can in the next moment say anything bad about me. For whoever is not against us is for us. Truly I tell you, anyone who gives you a cup of water in my name because you belong to the Messiah will certainly not lose their reward. If anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than 2 hands to go into hell, where the fire never goes out. If your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where the worms that eat them do not die, and the fire is not quenched. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, then how can it make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. even when I read this, and I think even when I was reading it then, I do these, sometimes I get an emotion or a tone that I think fits what Jesus is saying, and I think Jesus is being a little bit of a smart aleck here. But remember, he does this. He's done this before. This is right up there with, okay, she did break the law. All right, whoever's without sin, cast the first stone. We know what happened there. It's kind of the same thing. Well, let's go back to the first part. You know, the disciples are more concerned about their own group position. Remember, they've been arguing about which one of them was greater earlier. They're more concerned about their own group position than that of helping free people or help people that are troubled by demons and sin. The disciples were jealous of a man who healed in Jesus' name. Now, we got to do the same thing today when we refuse to participate in a worthy cause because they're not affiliated with our denomination. They do not involve the kind of people with whom we feel most comfortable. They don't do things the way we're used to doing them. Or I just don't think our efforts are going to receive enough recognition. Those are all things that go through people's minds. And there are examples of it. I can see where I've never done it. I've never refused to do anything with anybody. Until I got so close with, the Catholic Church itself, because I really got into it. We're helping each other. But there's some denominations and some groups, that we would shy away from and maybe not help them in the cause because, we just don't do that. Pentecostal churches get a lot of grief. But, those people are dancing and singing, and I don't know if it's real speaking in tongues, but it's not up to me. I see somebody reveling in the Spirit. Now somebody asks, why do they revel so? Why is it so drastic and wild and crazy and out there? And, there are still a few that do the snake thing. It's not as prevalent as it's made out to be, but it happens. Because the rest of their lives are equally drastic and harsh and extreme. So when they celebrate and do anything, it's got to be extreme. Doesn't make any sense to us. We'd be very uncomfortable with them. I think we have to admit that to each other. I know it's doing things differently is difficult. First thing I was told, when you go into a new church, whatever you do not immediately change the order of service. Because you're going to make some people very upset. And that's just something you don't do. You don't go in and mess things up. Well, maybe sometimes we do need to go in and mess things up. Maybe that's how you get things done. We can't just always be in our little group. And it could be something for people we're not necessarily, or some people aren't necessarily comfortable with. Whether it be the ones that you're participating with or the ones that are serving. Some people really have a hard time serving the really down and out homeless. It's uncomfortable. And I'm not talking about people going at Christmas time and Thanksgiving and serving soup once a year. I'm talking about the people that do it every day. Every day. You gotta, those things happen. And there are people, I don't think we have to deal with this, but you're going to run into people that are just going to think, well, this is kind of a small thing. thing ain't nothing. But boy, if it's a big thing and it's going to be in the paper back there and there's going to be a politician there, because they want the recognition, I just assume they leave. If that's what you're here for, leave. All right? That's my little thing. But we can't be that way. We have to work together. Now, just because this guy was using Jesus' name to heal, he was really meaning it. His faith was strong enough, like the woman that touched his garment. Jesus said, "Woman, your faith has healed you." I mean, he's kind of saying, I didn't heal you. Your faith did. Just like whoever this guy is doing this, if it's working and God's letting it happen, God must be pretty faithful. Okay? It doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter. We don't need a name. We just need to know that somebody's doing it. And that's what we do. That's what let's be that guy. Use Jesus' name. It's okay. We're faithful followers. Now he moves on and gets into that little area there where he warns against temptation and, you know, if things cause you to stumble, well, of course your eye is not going to cause you to sin. Your feet's not going to cause, your hands, those aren't the causes of sin. Like I said, he's being, all right, well, if your hand causes it, cut it off. Well, he knows that the hand didn't cause it. Being human, being separate from God. Because what is sin? Remember, what is sin? Anything that separates you from God is sin. Anything that keeps your distance apart and you can't get together. Anything that's in the way is sin. Now Jesus is, you know, the whole thing about if they're not with us, or if they're not against us, they're with us. There again, Jesus is not saying that it's okay that being indifferent or neutral toward him is good. It's not near as good as being committed to him faithfully. He's not saying that it's all right to be indifferent and neutral. Now, because in Matthew, he says that whoever's not with me is against me. In both cases, Jesus is pointing out that neutrality, indifference, is actually not possible. Just like it's not possible your hand or your foot or your eye cause you to sin. Neutrality, they're not against us, they're with us. But it's impossible. He just said it. If they're against us, if they're the enemy, they're the enemy. If they're not, then they're with us. You either believe or you don't. There's no neutrality. You can't be neutral. If you're so vehemently against believing in Jesus to where you have to preach an atheistic doctrine, then I'm going to tell you what, you're the enemy. There's no neutrality. He's not saying it's okay, all right? It's another one of the things where he's being, you know, he's turning it around, make you think. Because you got to think, well, no, wait a minute, my hand doesn't cause it. Or how could you be neutral? How could you feel nothing? You can't feel nothing. My best friend, one of my best friends that recently died, I've told you before, we argue all the time. He really could not wrap his head around it. I didn't pound it into him. I loved him like a brother. He saw it. I intentionally did things that he would see. And the fact that he was so vehemently arguing against it would make me smile, because if you're that much against it, if you've got to fight it that hard, then somewhere in there you believe in it. Or you wouldn't care. You wouldn't be so passionate. You'd just go, it's stupid, and walk off. Now, you won't fight me about it? Let's fight. Because that means you're in it. You're in it. One way or another, you're in it. And that's what we have to do, is get people in it. Show them. They want to argue Now, despite all this, Jesus is not saying he's indifferent, and that whoever's not with me is against the old thing. Nevertheless, Jesus' followers, the ones that are with us, with him, they are never, ever, ever going to resemble each other. They're never going to look the same or belong to the same groups. We got to realize that. We got to reach out to some of these other groups. There's a lot of political things that get in the way of doing that. Don't want to really right now get into the whole thing of the first, 5 books of the Bible and the Torah being exactly the same. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just saying we have to realize that not everybody that's a true follower and believer like us is going to look like us, act like us, belong to the same organizations, groups, denominations, whatever. Because people who are on Jesus' side have the same goal of building up the kingdom. And never let your differences interfere with this goal. Those who share a common faith in Jesus should cooperate. We try to do, the church co-op here. I've been in other counties and places where it was the ministerial association. It's the same thing, same idea. I think the church co-op thing, however, just by the name of it, invites more of everybody. I mean, a ministerial association sounds like it's just us. Well, it's not. This co-op idea is actually a lot better. And it's more churches, and it's the entire county. So that's a way of doing that. Now, even there, hey, I run into things, even in a wonderful thing like that, and these great people, there are some things about some things, such as women in the pulpit, that they have a problem with. So what do? We don't worry about it. We work with them anyway. Okay? You don't want this particular minister up there, fine. Well, what can I do? What can you do? Well, that's okay with y'all. We'll work together. Because we got to stay together. It doesn't matter. If they do things different, and we do things different, when we're in our own buildings, respect each other. That's all we got to do. Don't get mad and leave and all this stuff. Because it happens. I've seen churches destroyed because one little thing was between, and they couldn't just say, all right, but we're still faithful followers. We don't have to agree. It's just like, you don't always, you guys don't have to like each other. You do need to love each other. But, it's just like I said in marriages. I don't care, if you're married any length of time at all, there's going to be times where, yeah, you still love the person, but, man, I don't like you right now. I don't like what's going on. I love you. But I don't have to like it. I don't have to like this. You know what I mean? It's not going anywhere. You're not going to leave them. People don't have to be just like us, in other words, to follow Jesus. Now this whole thing, like I said, was similar to let he use without sin cast the first stone. It's right up in there with that. Well, cut off your hand. Well, no. If you take this, like I said, this is one of those things about literal. There are cultures that take this literal, and they will cut your hands off for doing things. They'll pluck your eye out for doing things. They take it literal. That's not what Jesus is saying. They're ruining the whole thing. Jesus has never promoted self-mutilation. But it does express and stress the importance of cutting sin out of your life. Sometimes these things are painful. Self-discipline, cutting out sin. It's painful, but it's required. You know, again, let's take something simple like football practice. You know, some of you guys have been through it. Summer's miserable. You know it's miserable. You know it's going to be miserable. But you know if you just get through it, the reward's ahead. So you make yourself go through it. Well, if you can make yourself go through that, you can make yourself go through just about anything. So sometimes it's difficult to do. Giving up anything that separates you from God. You have to give up things that are separating you from being closer to Jesus. I don't know what it would be. It would be a lot of things. It's you. It's your individuality. It's something that you feel like is keeping you from it. Could be something really simple. Could be something very serious. It's just, who knows? You and God know. But you got to do something about it. And remember this. Jesus is worth any sacrifice or loss or discomfort. You know, if a relationship is keeping you from Jesus, you may have to break off that relationship. You know, if you've got someone in your life that you just gotta, you know, that's keeping you from, you know, the bad influence or keeping you from being closer to God, you've got to cut it off. It is difficult. And nothing, above all, nothing should stand in the way of faith. Now, the end of this, like I said, this thing it's very short, but it jumps around 3 distinct areas. We're going to take the last minute or two here and finish up with this salt thing. You know, who doesn't use salt? I mean, even if you're supposed to be restricted, you still use a little when you cook it, right? And who doesn't understand that salt makes a watermelon sweeter, not salty? How does that work? Well, it's the amazing thing about salt. But Jesus uses salt quite a bit in his parables and in his teaching. But let's look at the 3 qualities Jesus is pointing out. Number 1, we're using the salt. It says, everyone will be salted with fire. We should remember that God's faithfulness, just as salt, when used as a sacrifice, recalls God's covenant with his people. This is from Leviticus 2:13. Sacrifices are salted as part of recalling God's covenant. Number 2, we should make a difference in the flavor of the world we live in, like salt. It changes. It enhances food's flavor. We need to be that flavor changer, that flavor enhancer. Put a little spark in things. I mean, I do it naturally. I walk into a place or in a room, and if I feel uncomfortable, guess what? You're going to know I'm there. I'm going to be bubbly, and I'm going to own it. That's just my way of not being embarrassed. When you're big, you do these things. And I think God made me big to make me good at doing these kind of things. But we should make a difference in the flavor, how we act, how we show, how we help people. And number 3, we should be the people that counteract moral decay in society. We have to do the things to fight the moral decay in society. If you see something, do something about it. If someone needs help, either help them or tell someone or whatever it may be. But the decay, the lack of respect, the lack of discipline, all those things are rampant, but they can be fixed right here. They can be fixed through us, through Jesus. Just as salt preserves food from decay, to be effective, salt must touch the food. We have to touch the people. We have to be the salt, but we have to be on it. The salt has to be on it, touching it, soaking in. That's what we have to do. And that's what Jesus wants us to do for Him. He's the salt. Well, we need to be here to apply it, to help apply it. And to wrap up, Christians cannot withdraw from the world just because we don't like it, we don't agree with it, we're disgusted with it, we're tired of it, we're tired of all the shootings, we're tired of all this every day. My daughters won't watch. I said, you don't watch the news? I'll ask them, did you hear about this? No, what's going on? You don't watch the news? No, it's too depressing. And they're right. It is. But we have to have the desire to do that, to change it. Christians must not withdraw. Don't go off into a hermitage. Don't go off to a monastery. Get out in the public and work. But do it wisely. And the only way to do it wisely is do it with Jesus. Because when we lose the desire to salt the earth and want to withdraw, we become ineffective for Jesus and God. Don't be ineffective. Be the salt. Separate the things, to get rid of things that separate you from God, which are sin.